We have all been through moments when it seems that life turned upside down. Pain, fear, and uncertainty can make us question even what we believe. At these times, faith is like a lighthouse in the middle of the storm. But how to keep this faith alive when everything around us seems to crumble? Have you ever felt that you were praying, crying out, but the silence of God was deafening? You may be facing a desperate situation right now and wondering if He is really listening. The good news is that the Bible is full of transformation stories and miracles that happened just when everything seemed lost. The story of Hiro, a religious leader who found himself in the face of the greatest challenge of his life, is a powerful example of trust in God in the midst of chaos. His journey teaches us about surrender, perseverance, and the action of faith. With every step he has taken toward Jesus, he shows us that trusting God's plan, even when we seem to be interrupted, is the way to true transformation. In this content, we will dive into the lessons of this story and understand how to apply them to our daily lives. From dealing with spiritual challenges to seeing interruptions as part of the divine purpose, you will see that the storm may even be strong, but it does not last forever. What's more, when we pass it with faith, we get more strengthened. Get ready for a reading that goes beyond theory. Here you will find deep and practical reflections that can help you keep hope alive, regardless of the situation you are facing. After all, when we trust God truly, we know that He always has the last word. Are you ready for this journey of faith and transformation? So let's start. Faith is not just something we feel in times of tranquility, it is forged in the fire of the trials. When we face unexpected challenges, we are tested in our trust in God. Often our first reaction is to look for human solutions, trying to control what is out of our reach. But true faith invites us to look up and trust that there is a greater purpose, even when we do not see the exit. Hiro teaches us a great lesson about it. He was a respected leader, but when his daughter got sick severely, all her positions and status lost importance. The only thing that mattered at that moment was to find Jesus. And how many times don't we feel that way? When everything crumbles, we realize that our greatest resource is not in earthly things, but in seeking God with all our hearts. The challenge is to learn to depend on God before despair strikes us. Instead of resorting to it only when we are without options, we should cultivate it as our first choice. This means developing a life of continuous prayer, strengthening our relationship with Him daily. Thus, when the storms come, our faith will already be firm to support us. Perseverance in faith requires patience, something difficult when we want immediate answers. Often God allows us to go through trials not to punish us, but to teach us to trust without hesitation. He shapes us in the process, teaching us that waiting for it, as painful as it may seem, is part of spiritual growth. Faith also strengthens when we look back and remember the times God has already delivered us from impossible situations. Maintaining a gratitude diary can be a valuable practice to reinforce our trust. Remembering past miracles helps us face the present with hope. Finally, we are never alone. God is present even at the darker moments, and trusting Him is a daily exercise. Faith in desperation is not to deny reality or pain, but to choose to believe that, despite everything, God has a larger plan. Often we imagine God as a distant, observing everything from an unreachable place. However, the truth is that He is closer than we can imagine. Jesus came into the world not only to perform miracles, but to establish a personal relationship with each of us. He knows our pains, our fears, and our difficulties. When we look at the story of Hiro, we see a man who not only heard of Jesus, but who had a personal encounter with Him. It teaches us that faith is not just believing in the existence of God, but building a daily relationship with Him. Trust in God is strengthened as we know Him deeper. Yes, as a close friend hears us and supports us, God wants this same level of intimacy with us. He does not expect perfection, but a sincere and willing heart. Prayer need not be a complicated ritual. It can be an honest conversation, an outburst, or even a simple "Lord, help me in difficult times." In times of trial, it is this proximity that sustains us. Knowing that God cares about us individually gives us strength to continue. He does not only see us as part of a crowd, but as beloved children, each with a specific purpose and a unique path outlined by Him. Many feel unworthy to approach God because of past failures or errors. But Jesus never rejected those who sought Him with sincerity. On the contrary, He always reached out to welcome, restore, and transform. This is the essence of a personal God. It is accessible to everyone who wants to know Him. If you want to strengthen your faith, start developing this proximity. Separate moments from your day to talk to God, read your word, and reflect on how He has guided your life. The more you connect with it, the more you will notice your presence in every detail of your daily life. Hiro was a leader of the synagogue, a respected and influential man. But when his daughter was on the brink of death, he realized that his status and knowledge could not save her. His only hope was Jesus. It is often only when we are facing a desperate situation that we realize that we need to seek God with humility. As he approached Jesus, Hiro required nothing. He filed himself, recognizing that only Christ had the power to change his reality. This act of humility teaches us that, regardless of our position or knowledge, we need to recognize our total dependence on God. True faith requires delivery. On the way to Hiro's house, there was an interruption. A woman with blood flow touched Jesus and was healed. This delay could have been a source of despair, but Hiro remained with Jesus. Often our requests seem to be postponed, but that does not mean that God has forgotten us. He has the right time to act. When messengers arrived with the worst news, his daughter had died, Jesus looked at Hiro and said, "Don't be afraid, just believe it." This simple phrase summarizes the challenge of faith, believing, even when everything seems lost. Our trust cannot depend on the circumstances, but on God's faithfulness. Arriving at Hiro's house, Jesus ignored those who cried and doubted. He came in, took the girl's hand, and said, "Talita Kumi," which means, "Girl, I tell you, get up." And she got up. The miracle not only restored the girl's life, but strengthened the faith of all who witnessed the power of God in action. This story teaches us that even in the face of the worst situation, we must persevere in faith. The answer may not come in our time, but God never arrives late. He turns pain into testimonies and teaches us that with Him nothing is lost. Faith is not just a feeling, but a daily decision to trust and act. Hiro was not stopped waiting for a miracle to happen. He took the initiative to seek Jesus. We often believe that it is enough to pray and wait, but Hiro's story teaches us that true faith drives us to act, even when the scenario seems unfavorable. When we face spiritual challenges, we need to move toward God, just as Hiro did. He did not allow fear or pride to stop him from going to Jesus. Similarly, we must act with determination, seeking God in prayer, reading the Word, and in the practice of faith in our daily lives. Active faith also means facing difficulties without giving up. Hiro faced obstacles on the way, from the crowd to the apparent delay of Jesus. However, he did not go back. This teaches us that perseverance is essential in the journey of faith. Often challenges are just tests to strengthen our trust in God. Another important point is that faith involves humility. Hiro, a respected leader, pronounced himself before Jesus, recognizing that he needed him. This reminds us that regardless of our position or knowledge, we must have a humble heart to seek God. True faith requires that we leave pride aside and recognize our dependence on it. Action in faith is also reflected in our willingness to obey. Jesus asked Hiro to simply believe, even when he received the news of his daughter's death. In difficult times, our natural reaction may be to doubt or question, but God calls us to trust and follow His guidance, even when we do not understand. Finally, Faith without action is just an empty belief. If we want to see miracles and transformations in our lives, we need to act in faith. This can mean forgiving someone, taking a step of courage toward our call, or simply trusting God when everything seems lost. True faith leads us to act with confidence in the divine plan. Life does not always follow the script we plan. Sometimes it seems that we are on the right track, but suddenly an interruption arises. The story of Jairo teaches us that these unexpected breaks do not mean God's abandonment, but part of his greatest purpose. Jesus was interrupted on the way to Jairo's house, and that could have been a source of despair. But in the end, the miracle happened. When we face challenges, we can see interruptions as obstacles or learning opportunities. God does not act according to our hurry, but according to his perfect plan. The delay in Jairo's path showed that God has the right time for everything. When we think he's taking, in fact, he is preparing something bigger. Many times we were frustrated because we don't understand why something was postponed or didn't happen the way we expected. But what if this delay is exactly what we need? Sometimes God prevents us from following a way to protect us or to teach us something essential. Jairo could have given up when Jesus stopped to heal the woman with blood flow, but he remained firm. Patience and faith is one of the biggest challenges. We want quick answers, immediate solutions. But God works in silence, behind the scenes. He teaches us to trust, even when it seems that nothing is happening. Just as Jairo had to wait, we are also called to rest in the certainty that God is in control. If there is anything that seems to be late in your life, remember that Jesus has not forgotten you. He does not distract himself or lose his focus. He knows exactly what he is doing. The secret is to trust and keep walking, even when the interruptions seem too long. In the end, interruptions can become testimonies of faith. What seemed a delay can be the key piece of God's plan for your life. The important thing is not to give up, but keep trusting. God is not delayed, he whims. Often our view of life is limited to what we can see at the moment. When we undergo trials, the first reaction can be despair and frustration. But what if we look at difficulties as growth opportunities? The story of Jairo teaches us that instead of focusing on pain, we must trust that God is writing a greater purpose. Change of perspective begins when we choose to see the blessings already present in our lives. Even in the midst of chaos, there is always something for which we can be grateful. Jairo could have revolted with the interruption on the way of Jesus, but he chose to remain by his side. What seemed a delay, in fact, was part of the divine plan. Another fundamental aspect is to learn to trust in God's time. When everything seems lost, we can ask ourselves, what does God want to teach me with it? This simple question helps us get out of the position of victims to assume a posture of spiritual growth. Tests are not punishments, but cutting tools. Gratitude is also a key factor to transform our vision. When we thank you even before seeing the miracle happens, we demonstrate our confidence in God. This strengthens us and keeps us firm, regardless of circumstances. Just as Jairo chose to trust, we must also cultivate this habit. Changing perspective means learning to see challenges as part of the process. What seems to be an end can actually be a new beginning. God teaches us to look beyond immediate and see the complete picture. Our faith is strengthened when we understand that even in interruptions, God continues in control. Finally, trusting the divine purpose is the key to facing any storm. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? We should ask, how can I grow up with it? This simple change in the way of thinking helps us to live with more lightness and hope, knowing that God always has the best for us. When everything seems lost, it is natural to feel discouragement and fear. However, the story of Jairo teaches us that even when the situation seems irreversible, God is still acting. What seemed like a definitive end, the death of his daughter, was actually an opportunity for God's power to manifest in an extraordinary way. Jesus did not despair with the news of the girl's death. On the contrary, he encouraged Jairo to continue believing. This teaches us that our faith must remain firm, even when everything seems contrary. God's silence does not mean absence, but preparation for something greater. Many times, we wonder why certain situations happen. We may not understand immediately, but God has a perfect plan that is always in progress. Just as Jairo saw the resurrection of his daughter, we can trust that God is operating miracles in our lives, even when we cannot see. Perseverance in faith is essential to seeing the fulfillment of God's promises. Jairo could have given up hearing that his daughter had died, but chose to stay with Jesus. This teaches us that if we continue to trust, we will see the glory of God to manifest in our way. God never fails, and His will always prevails. We may face spiritual trials and challenges, but nothing is beyond His control. What seems to us to an end may be the beginning of a great transformation. The storm may be intense, but it has no power to prevent divine purpose. Therefore, when life seems uncertain, remember God still has the last word. He has a plan for each of us, and when we fully trust, we will see that His will is always fulfilled at the right time. Faith does not deliver us from storms, but strengthens us to cross them. Just as Jairo saw the transformation happen when he kept his confidence in God, we are also called to persevere, even when circumstances seem unfavorable. God's silence does not mean absence, it means that He is working behind the scenes. And you? How have you faced the challenges that arise in your way? Have you chosen to trust or have been carried away by fear? Remember that each trial is an opportunity to strengthen your faith and witness the power of God in your life. If this message has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs this word of hope. Subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and keep following our content to strengthen your spiritual walk. May your faith remain firm and that you never forget God always has the best for you.